Hello everyone, I'm Kibitz and welcome to this Satisfactory guidebook. Over the years, I've put 3,000 hours into the game and I get a lot of similar questions, which is why I'm making this. And also why I've designed this to be a utility resource, so I don't expect everyone to watch it all. Check out the description for all the timestamps, and if you're scrolling over the video, take a look in the top left to see the color code for which section you're scrolling in. And then if you're looking for more guides, I'm not your guy, okay? This is like the one. And I mostly like to do Let's Play stuff. So if you want to support me, check out my Patreon, or just leave a nice comment below. And with that, let's get started. And the best place to begin is starting areas. And in Satisfactory, you get 4 choices: the grass fields, rocky desert, northern forest, or dune desert. And spoiler alert, all of them are on the same map. So when you're choosing between the starting locations, you're picking an area of the map to start in. But if you want to walk over to another one, you can. And if you're wondering about which one to start in, I'll rank them first and then tell you the details of them each after. So if you're a new player, grass fields by far is ideal. Rocky desert would be a close second, but then dune desert would be the third, and the worst starting location to be northern forest. But again, new players, grass fields, rocky desert, amazing. But to get more in depth, starting with the green fields, it is an amazing starting location due to the sheer number of free nodes to use for your projects. Because when you're just starting out, you only have the Mark 1 miner, and the Mark 1 miner can't extract a whole lot. So what do? You build more Mark 1 miners. As many as you need, or as many as you want. Because alongside having lots of resource nodes, you have tons of space to automate in. Not too much that can get in your way, except for the beans. Alongside that, there's enough water for you to mess with, easy sources of coal for steel, and right over the ridge here is a great place for your first coal plant. Lots of coal, lots of water, nice path down. It's perfect. Super easy to progress through the game. And even beyond into the fuel era as well. Because if you follow the coast down this way, there's tons of free nodes over here for plastic, rubber, and oil setups. But what's even better is if you go right down through this purple forest here, you come across this crater lake biome. And in this crater lake biome, you can set up a turbo fuel power plant. So I'd recommend setting up plastic and rubber in the north, then power plant stuff in the crater. Or just everything in the crater, because it's fantastic, honestly. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows in the grass fields, because a lot of the nodes are impure in this biome, which means if you set down a miner on them, they won't get as many resources. And later in the game, that can get a little annoying. Another thing is, things are far apart around here, which is kind of good and kind of bad. It's good because it forces you to kind of spread out your factory across the world. But that also can be a bit of a slog if you don't have a lot of good traversal tools. And in that same vein, the worst part about the grass fields is that you are surrounded by mountains on all sides pretty much, except for the coast over here. So not only do you have to build a ton of infrastructure, but what you create has to be a little unconventional if you want to get around. But if you still want to start here, my tips would be to build with blueprints all the time. In fact, it's one of my best pieces of advice for the whole game. Because since you have to build all this infrastructure everywhere, you really want to use Blueprint Auto Connect. So you can connect blueprints together and scoot them around. So if you need to build a belt highway across the entire map, it takes no time at all. In just a couple clicks, you can build a belt across a biome. And the last piece of advice is expect to build up. This might look like a ton of space, but once you really get going in this game, you will be surprised at how large your factory can grow. Which is again why you want to use blueprints. Even for factory floors and stuff. And there's a quick recap. Onward slow, the Rocky Desert. What's good about the Rocky Desert? Almost everything, actually. Lots of nodes, and they're good nodes. Space all over the place. Super simple and clear logistics routes across the entire map and up the mountains. And like with the grass fields, there's convenient spots to set up your first coal plants and other things. This isn't talked about much, but drop pods are readily available and easy to see. Drop pods have a lot of starter loot to help you get going, and then the alternate recipes, well, some of them are pretty good. And since you can dismantle these as well, you can get some cheeky advanced components earlier on. Use those components in the MAM. And ironically, even though you're working in a desert, there's water aplenty. So when you start working with silly late game recipes, you don't have to go crazy looking for puddles. That is, if you make it to the late game, because probably the biggest con about the Rocky Desert is that your jump into the late game can be a little rough. If you want to set up turbo fuel over by your coal nodes, well, there is sulfur nearby, but the oil is way far away. And if you run this way and up this mountain, there's some more coal. However, the sulfur is like way over there, and oil somewhere that way. And that way has a lot of bad guys. So my tips if you're starting here is to embrace trains and trucks. There are a lot of easy paths and lots of good resources all around. So if you can gather them all up in one spot, you're golden. And because turbo fuel is such a thing, if you head down the coast, you end up in this spot that has a ton of oil. So probably just setting up a fuel power plant would be a lot easier. And sure, it'll take up a little bit more space and not produce as much power. You do have a ton of oil around here and all the space, so it should be fine. And again, a quick recap. But you know what's not fine? The Northern Forest start. Space to build? You're looking at it. But I guess there are some good things. Like there's plenty of biomass for all of your bio-nuggies and biomass burners. The progression through this area is not very linear, so you're gonna have a very interesting Satisfactory experience. Maybe a little uncomfortable though. And if you are a speed runner, there's lots of cool loot and routes around here. So if you wanna beat Satisfactory in like 8 hours, ooh, this is the place where you can do it. Plus with all the drop pod loot as well, you can get going real quick. But probably the best feature about the Northern Forest are the custom start locations. Since you spawn in a central area of the world, you can kind of take your keys to wherever you like. And if you travel down the hill far enough, you get to this spot here, which has a bunch of very good nodes. Good node variety, is close by to oil, power slugs out the wazoo, and you even got a nice coal setup right next door. Here's some directions. Cons though, everything else. The terrain, terrible. Fart rocks out the wazoo. And although you're technically centralized in the map, good luck getting infrastructure through this biome and out to other places of the world. Trust me, I've played for thousands of hours, and this is always the worst spot to build a train. But if you are crazy enough to start here, I wish you good luck. Maybe follow the road down to that better starting location that's over on the cliff there. Or if you insist on staying, I'd recommend you build up. Like either build as vertically as possible, or just do like a sky-based situation. You get access to a lot of nodes and dodge most of the terrain. It also saves you time doing quote-unquote cleanup. Or for real, probably just start somewhere else. Woo! And to recap, not new player friendly. And finally, the Dune Desert. One of the best biomes in the game if you want to do a mega project. You get all the resources and space you could ever need. The terrain's tons of fun, especially once you get some vehicles. Then just over the cliffside here, there's some coal next to water for a coal plant. And technically with the ocean right there is a lot of water, just not where you want it. And then there's tons of oil ready next door for you once you get over the giant cliff. And oh, did he want bauxite for aluminum? Yeah, good luck with that one, Chief, because the closest nodes are chilling in the swamp. A great place where all your best friends like to hang out. So what do you do if you spawn in here then? Well, definitely get some logistics lines throughout the place. Make your life a lot easier. And then once you get thirsty for that black gold, you got two options with this cliff. And one option is you can literally just go around it. Like you scoot around here, set up a train line right over to there, and then all of its oil can be yours. Alternatively, you can go through the cliff, but take this advice with a grain of salt because although you can scoot through the mountains, getting a lot of logistics through right there gets really annoying later on. But my final piece of advice here is if you're starting in this biome, stick it out for a little while. Don't really worry about exploring. There's actually a tiny bit of oil just over here for rubber and plastic to get started with. Again, your power can be dealt with right across the cliff there. And you have all the resources you really need here to power through most of the game. But it's really just that bauxite that will force you beyond the walls. You gots to have it, even if it might be a little stinky. Overall, it's still my personal favorite starting location, and more than anything, it'd be the best place for a second playthrough. New players might find it tedious though. So once you figured out which starting location you want to start at, and you've landed, now what? Will you press W to move forward? No, I'm kidding. You remember your ABCs. Always be collecting. You want leaves and logs for biopower? Berries and nuts for the ma'am? New materials for research? Spheres and loops for all that jazz. Then as you're running around, look for drop pods. Their main purpose is to give you alternate recipes and hard drives, but there's debris around them as well that could really help you get started. And as you're out exploring or building your factories, you might stumble across these little guys. They are lizard doggos. And if you're holding a pale berry in your hand, they'll see it and they'll want it. Okay, usually they're supposed to run up and grab the pale berry from you. Oh wait, out of left field. All right, so once they eat the pale berry, you give them a pet and they're your best friend. And you can name them, and every so often, they'll find stuff for you. And they'll follow you around, and they're very cute. Watch them prance in his floppy little ears. Oh my gosh, I love these guys to bits. But there's no way to make them actually like stay. They don't understand like commands. There's no mind behind those eyes. So you'll have to make a cage for them or something, or make them offices at your nuclear power plant so they can take care of things, right guys? Right. Maybe lay off the coffee there, buddy. And then once you have things going, in my opinion, you definitely want to start finding some Caterium. It's like the gold ore, and working your way down the mam tree towards zip lines, and then find some quartz and research your way down towards blade runners. The blade runners just help you move and groove a lot faster and help you take less fall damage. And the zip lines allow you to use power cables to travel. And at least with the little power poles, you're gonna have to get used to kind of dodging them. But then with the power towers, once you're online, you can just mosey on through them. So they're amazing for early game transport and logistics. From there, just automate stuff, just as much as possible. Like the craft bench is nice and all, but it's addictive. Like you'll quickly burn out if you're handcrafting all of your iron ingots, and then all of your iron plates, all your screws, etc. Because all the future parts are gonna need the previous parts. So the more you're handcrafting, the more annoying things are gonna get later on. So once you have the chance to start automating anything, don't worry about being organized, just get things done, stuff the goods into bins and let her rip. Because the main early game goal is really to get some coal power online, to automate power production. That way you don't have to peasant trot around the world gathering up leaves and logs and whatnot all the time. It gets tedious. No, just go and find yourself some coal and a little bit of sip and just get that party started. You can worry about ratios later. Because automated power means automated item production, and you don't have to worry about this, and you'll be able to run around doing other things while items build up. And what other things should you do? Well, for one, you can get yourself an object scanner. If you hold down left click, you can scan for different types of items, like nuts, or power slugs, or most importantly, spheres and sloops. Mercer spheres unlock dimensional depots, wherein you can upload items to them, and then they'll always be available to you. So now, so long as I have these things in my depot, I won't have to carry them in my inventory. A few tips about the dimensional depots. Each of them fully upgraded has an upload rate of 240 items per minute. And for some things like concrete, that might be a little slow. Well, that's just for one uploader. You can always build 2 uploaders, 3 uploaders, all for the same item. And then each of them can upload at 240 per minute. But while you're getting started, I'd just recommend uploading your most important materials. That is your main belting material and whatever you need to scale. So reinforced iron plates, cable, iron rods, concrete, wire, copper sheets, and all that sort of jazz. And then just uploading as much of those things as possible. As for the loops, they are unbelievably good. Probably the best items in the game. You want them all. Because once you get into the alien technology tech tree, you can unlock the Alien Power Augmenter, which needs computers, so you'll get it later in the game. But once you do, each one generates 500 megawatts of power for free. And that's not all. It has a final form. Once it's attached to your power grid, it amplifies the amount of power you get. So the static 500 megawatts, but then the circuit boost of 10%. And as you scale your max power, that circuit boost number goes crazy. And then late game, if you're willing to make the alien power matrices, that power boost becomes 30%. So if you're making 1,000,000 megawatts, that's a free 300,000 extra. But that's like 100 hours in. I wouldn't worry about it too much yet. Now, what's way more practical early game is that you can double item production with a loop. So same inputs, double the output at the cost of a whole whack more power. At least when you're not playing in a creative world. And beyond just the convenience of getting double the items you need, this also includes doubling power shards. You can collect power slugs around the world and process them inside a constructor. But you can use the loops to get double the power shards from each slug. Oh, and the power shards just increase production speed. So unlike the loops, if you put in power shards into a machine, the ratio of inputs to outputs is the same, but it's faster. And again, takes up a whole whack more power, but then you don't have to build as many machines, which can be really convenient. But most importantly, you want the power shards to put into your resource miners to get you more resources to build bigger factories. You can't put the loops in these, but you can put the power shards. So when you get these, your number one priority is to put them into the miners. So you got your basics set up, you got your bean watching over things, and now you want more power. So here's how to set up a starter coal power plant. Each generator makes 75 megawatts of power and takes 15 coal per minute, or 25 petroleum coke per minute, or 7.143 compacted coal per minute. But we'll just worry about the coal for now. But no matter the input, they all will take 45 water per minute. And presuming we're working with coal here, a great starter ratio is 8 generators and 3 water extractors. That'll end up being 120 coal per minute and 360 water per minute, for a grand total of 600 megawatts. But if you only have Mark 1 pipes that can carry 300 fluids per minute, you're gonna need 2 of them to carry 180 fluids per minute each. So what you can do is you can have 2 water extractors, one running at 100%, and then another running at 50% clock speed to get your 180. Or you can have 1 water extractor with 1 power shard running at 150% clock speed to get you what you need. But with power shards, they take up a lot of power, but it's also very convenient. Either way, you're gonna want each of the 180 pipes going into 4 coal burners, and then you can have 1 Mark II belt that can handle the 120 coal per minute, just going through a series of splitters and into each of the generators. But to make sure the fluids are all good, and in fact in any fluid system, you should always have a buffer at the end of it, raised above wherever the fluid input is for your machines. So at the end of the line here, these pipes combine, go up to this fluid buffer, and that just prevents fluid slooshing, which isn't that important when you're starting out, but as you scale throughout the game, it becomes a bit of an issue. And speaking of issues, always be sure to put down some batteries whenever you're building power plants. It's a lot better on the mind to see a notification that these are draining rather than your power grid failing. Lastly, whenever you're building a factory in this game, you want to think about scaling it. For example, with this system, I could expand it to the left, a little bit to the right, but then we run into terrain and spookiness. Whereas this other orientation would be a lot better, where I can just expand that as far as I really want, adding in water extractors and whatnot as I go. Because in the game, you get better miners, which get you more resources, or you might find more power shards, which will allow you to get even more stuff, which will allow you to expand your systems further. So definitely plan to scale. On that note, there's some ratios that are really handy. Like when you're just starting out and you're making your iron plates, you get 20 per minute each, right? So it's best to have 3 smelters, 3 constructors that all merge together into one 60 iron plate per minute belt. That way they can be stored up and be used in future productions. Then for cable, you're gonna want 1 smelter, splitting into 2 wire constructors, which then merge the outputs into 1 cable constructor, which will probably keep you going through most of the early game. Lastly, screws. That'll just be 1 iron smelter, splitting the output between 2 iron rod constructors. Then you combine the outputs into a 30 iron rod per minute belt, and then split it into 3 screw constructors, making you 120 screws per minute once you remerge the line, which conveniently can run 2 assemblers, making your reinforced iron plates. And lo and behold, if you make 60 iron plates per minute, a 60 belt of iron plates can also go into 2 assemblers, leaving you with 10 reinforced iron plates per minute. All very convenient. However, it can be convenienter if you have some alternate recipes, of which I have some favorites. So if you get some hard drives, I'd highly recommend getting the iron ingot to wire alternate, called iron wire, because copper is a lot more rare than iron in the game. The solid steel ingot, which combines iron ingots with coal to make steel ingots. At the cost of more machines and power, this recipe is a lot more efficient on your resources, and also having 60 steel per minute per machine is a lot easier to work with. Then there's the steeled frame alternate, which makes modular frames out of reinforced plates and steel pipes, so you don't have to use screws or whatnot. And then finally, the stitched iron plate recipe, which takes a bunch of plates, a bunch of wire to make reinforced iron plates. In fact, with both those recipes and this other one for the steel rotors, you can eliminate screws from the entire game, or at least the early game. You'll need an alternate for heavy modular frames later on. But yes, the steel rotor recipe has the rotors be made out of steel pipe and wire, which not only eliminates screws, but also makes it the same recipe to make stators. So if you have the same stuff to make both rotors and stators, those machines can combine together and make motors really simply. So then to recap the alternates: iron wire, solid steel ingots, stitched iron plates, steeled frames, and steel rotor. My early game top 5 alternate recipes. Now once you got your consistent power and all your items being stockpiled, this is a great time to start exploring the MAM and getting cool new tech, like an alien megafauna. You can get the bioorganic things, which are worth a ton of awesome shop coupons, in which you can get a ton of really nice aesthetic items. The boombox, way late in the game you can get even hard drives, or even more importantly, the golden nut statue. But no, focusing up on a little bit of ticket stuff can be really, really helpful. I'd highly recommend getting the personal elevator, not just for personal travel, but also for bringing power in between floors of your giant factories. The ladder is also really good for traversing the world. Then everything in the management tab is amazing for factory organization and prettiness, but it's not strictly necessary. Just like all of the extra paint finishes you can get. Like Caterium. Ooh. And my favorite thing, concrete foundations. You know, it's really hard to go wrong in the Awesome Shop, except for buying any of this equipment stuff. Do not waste your coupons on equipment or on parts. Coupons get progressively more difficult to attain as you get more of them. Like for example, in my 1,000-hour Let's Play world, it costs about, 80 million standard points to get a coupon. And so yeah, if I had ended up purchasing, I don't know, a radiation filter, that would have sucked. And it's better just to automate everything anyways. Back to the MAM though. Absolutely go for your alien power augmenter. Oh my goodness, it's free real estate. And it's so good. Along, of course, with the dimensional depot. Then down in the mycelia tree, I'd scoot over this way and get yourself a parachute. They are reusable and amazing for exploring. In quartz, you can go down and get your blade runners. Then further down the line, you can go and get yourself an explorer. An awesome all-terrain vehicle to get you places where you don't have your power yet. Or, just to use and explore. It's also just really fun to rip around in and say hi to the local wildlife with. Oh my gosh, it can actually kill the wildlife too. I didn't even know that. Wait a second. Beep. Oh no, I broke his leg. Oh, he's back. Yeah, if you want to do a violence, you need the sulfur tech unlocks. Explosive rebar, definitely be one of the best. Or even just having some nobelisks to keep with you. But by far, the most important thing you want to get in the MAM is absolutely compacted coal and then turbo fuel. You must get the turbo fuel. Turbo fuel is life, it is love, and it's something we'll be getting to in just a moment. Because it's time to talk about oil. The world's precious black gold. Oil processing is unlocked in Tier 5, along with the jetpack, Mark IV belts, and petroleum power. Arguably the main power source in all of Satisfactory. But alright, let's break it down. Let's pretend you found 600 crude oil per minute to send into a pipe. What can you do with it? Well, here is a very basic setup to get you your first rubber and plastic. You split the 600 oil into 2 pipes of 300 oil per minute each, 300 of which goes into 10 plastic refineries, and then the other 300 goes into another 10 rubara refineries. Just with the starter recipes, where crude oil becomes rubar and the heavy oil residue. Same vein, crude oil becomes plastic and heavy oil residue. I'll give you enough rubber and plastic to put into your dimensional depots and get you going to build and automate other things. And the whole system makes 200 rubber, 200 plastic, and a lot of heavy oil residue, which you could turn into residual fuel and power. And with the setup I just displayed, the 300 heavy oil residue could become 200 fuel, and that 200 fuel equals 10 fuel generators it could run, and that's 2,500 megawatts. Pretty good. Alternatively, you could run that heavy oil residue into 7.5 refineries to make petroleum coke. That's just this recipe here. And with 900 petroleum coke, you could run a lot of coal generators. Each generator would burn 25 petroleum coke per minute, meaning you could run 36 generators for 2,700 megawatts, which is more than the fuel generators, but then you have to take into account the amount of work and the extra power you'd need for the water. So on net, probably not worth it. So diving in a bit more to the fuel power, let's look at a setup for oil into fuel. So 600 pipe again goes into 10 refineries making fuel and polymer resin. The polymer resin, just send it to an awesome sink or do other stuff with it. Definitely at some point you want to automate some fabric with the resin and a little bit of water. That way you can automate gas filters, which take fabric, coal, and iron plates. And you just need like one of these manufacturers set up in your whole world and you'll be fine. Or if you have enough weapons, you can just blow up every fart source in the game. But I'd still recommend automating the gas masks. But back to the refineries here. You're gonna end up turning that 600 crude oil into 400 fuel. That 400 fuel can run 20 fuel generators, each generator making 250 megawatts each. So you can get 5,000 megawatts out of that 600 oil. And those are just some starter examples. The best thing about oil in this game is how much fun and diversity there is with it. I don't want to get too into the weeds here, but I'll show you some examples where you can use that petroleum coke you make out of heavy oil residue in your aluminum setup to make you more aluminum scrap, which is really handy. Or you could of course make it into fuel again. Or, arguably the best alternate in the game, allows you to turn heavy oil residue and water into fuel. Now, you can do this in a refinery, which adds in the packaging, which is honestly quite annoying. Or you could wait until you have blenders later in the game to do the same thing without the packagers. But effectively, this turns water into an oil product, which is nuts. Absolutely use this recipe. Absolutely do it. Do it, it's so good. Beyond that, oil comes with a lot of conveniences. Like say you need a ton of cable. Get some wire, a little bit of heavy oil residue, cable for days. Or you can use some rebar and wire to make more cable inside of an assembler. Or a similar vein, you can use petroleum coke and rubber to make circuit boards, just circuit boards out of oil. Then there's iron plate conveniences, where you get plastic and iron ingots to make tons of iron plates in the late game. And then there's like a million more recipes in the manufacturers and blenders and whatnot. So oil is super versatile, super powerful, and easily one of the most, if not the most important resource in the game. And one of the best parts about the fuel era is the jetpack. It lets you fly. And once you make it in the equipment workshop, you can equip it and choose a preferred fuel. Packaged liquid biofuel lasts forever, but it's a little slow to scoot around in. Solid biofuel technically works, but it's terrible. Packaged turbo fuel lets you zip around very fast, but doesn't last a long time. Rocket fuel is even faster than turbo fuel. And then the best thing of all is packaged ionized fuel, which lasts forever and is super fast. Oh, and then there's packaged fuel, which is good. It's just good. No complaints. Now remember in the MAM when we're talking about the sulfur tree and that turbo fuel? Once you unlock the compacted coal and the turbo fuel recipe, you can make turbo fuel. And in my opinion, this is the game's main power source. It's really all you need to complete everything. Not only that, but it scales off of your previous oil setups as well, because you just need fuel and then to add in some compacted coal in a refinery to get the turbo fuel. And then the compacted coal, it's just coal and sulfur. So it's really, really, really easy to include the upgrade. And back to our 400 fuel example, you'd end up with 334 turbo fuel, approximately, which could run 44.5 fuel generators, which makes 11,000 and change megawatts. So you double your power for just a couple extra resources. And then late game, if you need even more than that, you can just go up to rocket fuel, which is turbo fuel combined with nitric acid. You even get some compacted coal back, so you can ease up on your requirements earlier on. Or you can just send it to the awesome sink. Main thing is, rocket fuel, incredible. And the nitric acid, no biggie. Just another blender with nitrogen gas, water, and iron plates, nitric acid. There you go. And the numbers scale even crazier, where your 334 turbo fuel becomes 556 rocket fuel, 134 fuel generators for 33,000 megawatts. So the 400 fuel at the beginning was like 5,000 megawatts. Once it's turbo fuel, 11,000 megawatts. Once it's rocket fuel, 33,000 megawatts. And realistically, in a normal playthrough, you probably only need 50,000 megawatts to beat the whole game, so yeah, rocket fuel can get you there very quickly. And in my opinion, this Blue Crater Lake biome is the perfect place to set up a giant rocket fuel plant. You have your sulfur, coal out the wazoo, lots and lots of sip, plenty of oil, and the nitrogen gas, well, chilling over there, all ready to go into a power plant. And for context, this is the green fields, this is the Blue Crater Lake that I'm talking about. So as you progress through the game, eventually you end up in Tier 7 with bauxite and aluminum, the bane of most people's existence. And there are three main things you need for it. You need bauxite, coal, and nitrogen. So looking at the Satisfactory map here, just try to see like intersections between bauxite, coal, and nitrogen, and maybe build your factory for aluminum in between all three. There are three really good places I'd recommend to build aluminum though. Number one, and probably the best one by far, is over here. So this is the green fields, this is the Blue Crater Lake, and over here there's a little pond, some quartz, and then tons of bauxite, some bauxite in the red forest up the hill, and even more coal, more water, like everything you need is right there. Same kind of vein, just over across this way. Again, this is the green fields. Over up to the north, this is by the oil patches there. You have some nitrogen, coal, water, and you can bring down bauxite from up in the cliffs here. The terrain kind of sucks, but the resources are close by, so it works. And then there's the swamp. Oh, this biome is a nightmare. But you have your nitrogen, coal, and bauxite, so it can work. You just have to, deal with the spiders. Also, just to help with the visualization, here is a Satisfactory map just with some texture in it. So again, green fields down there, Blue Crater Lake. The best place I was recommending is just up over here. So you can see the red forest, the cliffs, there's the pond. Then this area is very, very cliffy, but again, has all the resources you need. And everybody knows what's going on with the swamp, right? Or if you don't, oh, you'll find out. But okay, we've picked a spot. Let's look into how to actually set up the aluminum. And oh my gosh, it is ridiculously complicated, especially if you're trying to use like the default recipes. I'd highly recommend alternates, but in case you are using the defaults, a decent ratio would be 2 alumina solution refineries, feeding the alumina into one pipe, into one refinery that makes aluminum scrap. Then taking that scrap, along with the silica byproduct, and throwing that into 4 foundries making aluminum ingots. Now the problem is that you won't have enough silica to feed all of these foundries. So you're gonna have to bring an extra source of silica in. But also, the bane of aluminum is the byproducts. You have to get rid of the extra water, and you have to get rid of the extra silica. If either stops, the alumina stops, and the whole system breaks down. So at least for items, it's pretty straightforward. You can have a merger for all of your silica into a smart splitter, so the main output goes towards your main production line. But if this main output ever gets full, you can set one side to overflow and into an awesome sink. That just gets rid of all the silica no matter what, so your machines never clog up and stop processing. But then the water byproduct. This is the worst. Now, there is a pretty rough solution where you can take that byproduct water, put it into a refinery, and then use it to make, I don't know, anything, like wet concrete. The main point is just to get the water out of this machine into something else, and then the concrete, you can just send it into a sink or something. Again, If this machine stops because there's too much water down here, the whole system stops. And for a long time, this is just what I did. Get some kind of alternate that uses a resource in water and then sync the output. However, there are some pipe tricks to solve the water output issue. What you need to do is from the aluminum scrap refinery, you set down a valve, then a pump, and then from the pump, you need that water to go into a pipeline junction in a specific way. If you have a pipeline junction in this orientation, which you can get from putting the pipeline junction on a wall, that junction will have priorities. The first priority will be the pipe that enters the bottom of the junction. Second priority is the pipe that enters the side of the junction. Third is the top, and then an output. So mission critically, the refinery that is making the aluminum scrap with the water byproduct, that pipe needs to go into the bottom of the junction. So it is prioritized. The big goal is to get rid of that water. Through priority 2, though, you need an initial water input to get the system started and keep it going. So you're gonna want a pipe scooting into the system, bringing the initial water and keeping the system topped up. But here's the kicker. With the initial pipe that's bringing in water, you don't want it to clog the whole system. So you definitely want a valve before a pump that's bringing in the net amount of water you need. So in this scenario, the alumina solution refineries each need 180 water. So that's 360 water for inputs. But then, once everything's processed, we get 120 water back. So that means the whole system, if we're recycling the scrap water, needs 240 outside water to keep going. So that initial pipe that started up the entire system will have to be limited with a valve to that net amount of water needed for the system. And that way, everything keeps rocking and rolling. And yes, it's very complicated, but oh my gosh, it gets so much easier if you have 2 alternate recipes. Alternate recipe number 1, sloppy alumina. Bauxite plus water equals alumina solution. No silica involved. Pipe the solution into another refinery. Grab some coal. You get your scrap, you get your water. This is just the basic recipe. And then with the scrap, there's a pure aluminum ingot recipe that turns the scrap into ingots. So no silly silica, everything's chillin'. And then with the pipes, just remember the same system I showed you before. Make sure your pipeline junctions are set up properly, and you're bringing in the net proper amount of extra water. Where for this system, the beginning needs 200. This system returns 120. So the net amount of water we need brought in is 80 per minute. By the way, if this is all just very overwhelming, I do have a aluminum setup blueprint available on my Patreon. Again, you can join the Patreon by clicking on the link in the description. Starting with vehicles. In Satisfactory, there are 7. There is the factory cart, tractor, truck, explorer, cyber wagon, trains, and drones. Wherein the factory carts exist to be cute, but actually can transport items, and they don't use any fuel, so hey, they're available. The tractors can move things from A to B, but not a ton of stuff. The trucks can move a lot of stuff from A to B, but use wheels. The explorer, best for exploring. Cyber wagon is, it's a cyber wagon. And arguably could just be considered a joke gone too far, but also, you can do that with bounce pads, which is interesting. How do you get the cyber wagon though? That will be on you to figure out. Or for your mental health, just forget it exists. And think about trains. Trains are the best. My favorite form of transport in all of Satisfactory. Very important, they go choo. Are easily expandable, and the rails actually bring power to each of the stations. So if you build a worldwide train network, you'll have power everywhere. And then finally, you have beans. No, I'm kidding. Drones. Drones are really, really good for the really finicky items that just need to go from A to B. Like say you're making 5 items per minute in some factory over here, and you need to bring them over to another factory over there, well then drones would be your best bet. Or if you need to gather, I don't know, some uranium from some very inconvenient place, a drone can bring that ore down to a factory location somewhere. So although there are quite a few vehicles, realistically there's probably 3 you may ever use. The trucks, trains, and drones. Because the tractors are really good just when you're starting out and you need stuff from A to B. Sure, go for them. But in almost every scenario, the truck is much better because it can carry twice as many things. And how you'll want to set up a truck is by building 2 truck stations that are powered, then parking at one, and pressing Q to get the vehicle controls. At which point, you'll want to start a recording. And now, your vehicle is memorizing the path it's going on. So, although we're following another little tractor's path, the truck is also pooping out little arrows. And those are its guiding marks. So when it goes to drive itself, it'll just try to drive from blue marker to blue marker, just like the tractor is right now. And if you mess up, you can click on nodes to edit or delete them. So say I just happen to crash or go way off the track like that, I can just go back through this path and delete those couple nodes, no problem. But the main thing is just to drive your vehicle to its destination. Now, some great things about both trucks and tractors is that you really don't need a lot of infrastructure to set them up. However, if you are building a big vehicle station or a transport route, I'd recommend setting up a vehicle station like so. But I'll talk about that in a moment. First, once you get to your truck station destination, you just want to hang out there for a second. And now underneath the truck, there is a pause node. That pause node can be adjusted. I usually adjust it to be about 60 seconds, but it just gives the vehicle some time to load up with material at the truck station or unload material. But anyway, while we're just making the path, we just need to stay there for a second. Then we just gotta turn around and go back the way we came. No, without being chased down by the bean. What'd I ever do to you, bean? Well, this bean, okay, look, I ran them over, but other bean, leave me alone. All right, I think we are safe. So once you get back to your original starting location, there's gonna be a little finish line icon. You just gotta cross that and you're good to go. Path recording is completed. So at this point, I just like to park the vehicle just somewhere else off the path and go fix up all of the nodes I may have messed up. Or change the pause nodes to be 60 seconds. So you just look at them, set the wait time. There you go. And that's just so this can unload. And I can also go along the path and be like, oh yeah, I crashed over here. How about we just delete these? Okay, and in doing so, now the truck is gonna follow the path we created from node to node. But now since those nodes don't exist, that truck is gonna go to the next node. I guess it would be this one. It's kind of hard to tell sometimes. So we'll just get rid of that. And yeah, the truck will just go straight. And with the nodes all fixed, just jump back into the truck, enable autopilot, and jump out. That's it. You're done. You're good. The truck will find its way back to its path and go on its own great journey. Sometimes they'll be confused, but if you just give them a little bit of space, it can kind of like teleport back to their nodes. There we go. Just does a little ghost mode thing, figures itself out, and it's off to the races. And then one of the best things about vehicles in Satisfactory is that even with the trucks and tractors, you can save their routes. So you see that they have all these markers here. Well, in the other truck, I saved the last path. So once I saved it, I can now click on this folder here, and wowie, what a name, is ready to be loaded. So I just built a new truck, loaded that path, enabled autopilot, and now that truck will be off to the races. Once it kind of like ghost modes its way to the path there. That way though, you can add more trucks to the route and speed up the throughput, i.e. how fast the vehicles are bringing stuff from one location to another. So say we have a factory that needs 600 coal per minute, and the one truck could bring 300 coal. Well, that other truck we just set up will double the throughput and enable the truck stations to bring 600 coal per minute to a destination, which can be really important if you're building a very big factory or a power plant. So back up the hill here, this is kind of my template for building truck stations, where I have the road be 3 tiles wide, the middle one being split in half, so that gives the trucks lots of room to turn and maneuver. And then for each truck station, I give the trucks 2 tiles to turn in, 2 tiles to stop, and then 2 tiles to turn out onto the main drag. That way we can copy and paste the truck station design and have this big old truck hub loop, bringing tons of items from A to B. And just at the end, making sure there's a good little turnaround space so the trucks don't get scared. Or maybe I should have gave them a bit more space or drove it a little bit better. Because there are a lot of cons when it comes to trucks. Number one, things can get in the way. The trucks can drive a little bit goofily at times. And truck accidents can be wild and wacky depending on the angle or what's happening. Plus, if the trucks kind of get off their mean, like, recorded path, they go a little crazy. But eventually what will happen is they'll kind of like go into a ghost mode and like teleport to where they're supposed to be. Kind of just caught the tail end of it over there. Nope, my tire's stuck. Great. Skill issue. Right, other truck? Right. So yeah, you can try your best with the trucks, and you know, for the most part, they will work because they respawn like that. But yeah, expecting like perfect throughput rates with them is a bit of a pipe dream. And honestly, the main reason to build trucks is just because they can be so freaking goofy at times. Now, trains is really where it's at. They are my favorite vehicle in Satisfactory. They do all that trucks can, except the rail can bring power around your world. They can be expanded with more freight cars to move more items. And once you kind of have a system, you can just add in more and more train stations to bring more and more items around your world. They are fantastic. In my Let's Play world, I have trains all over the place, with some train loops just stretching across entire biomes, or main lines that just go around the globe. And personally, I do like to build my railways kind of close to the surface, just so it adds some like character and pizzazz. But also, in case the train's getting just a little too wacky, it's a lot easier just to build the railway above everything and in the sky. Or what I've seen some people do is they build a railway just along the edge of the map, where it's all gonna be a consistent height. And then whenever they need like the railway to go into the world, they just scoot on off, build a train station, and call it a day. Now, whenever you're building a train track, in almost all scenarios, you're gonna wanna have two lines in parallel. One as an inbound track, one as an outbound track. And inevitably, you're gonna have to build some sort of intersection. And that means you're gonna have to mess with train signals. And they're not as bad as you think. So once you build your intersection that goes in all of the directions, you have block signals and path signals. Path signals you have to pretend are like the doorway looking in, and the block signal is a doorway looking out. So considering this is a right-hand drive system, the path here would go here, because this train signal is gonna look in this intersection to make sure there's no trains there. In a similar vein, over here, the train is gonna be looking at this intersection from this direction, and then over there. Then the block will go on the outbound lines. But then why didn't that work? What's going on here? That is what will happen to you, as it happens to me all the time, okay? The train signal stuff can be goofy. You can build it properly, and it'll sometimes just decide not to work. It is what it is. Sometimes just building and replacing the signals can save it. Usually building the signals a little bit further back from an intersection can help. And if all else fails, just rebuild the intersection in the directions where trains should go. So again, it's right-hand drive, right? So this train should want to go straight, but now that doesn't work. What? Learning something new every day. Huh, but it works that way. Huh, trains. And finally, at this intersection, train will either want to go straight or to the left. Signal not blinking, it's happy. The block signals will continue to blink though because they want another block signal in front of them. So once we add those in, they're happy. So yes, it is a ton of work to get all these train systems up and running, but once you have them, oh my gosh, they are, again, the best. You can expand them, you can bring items wherever you want in the world super easily, or even single trains for A to B transport sometimes. Pretty much I'm just making a bunch of copper ingots in this pit, but all I do with the copper ingots is I set them in this one train, and all it does is it goes back and forth. So it's just one train line going to one destination. Problem with a system like that is I can't expand it. Like I can make this train bigger maybe, but I can't add in multiple trains. Wherein with the loop system, it's like, hey, this train isn't delivering items fast enough. I can just add another one to the loop. Also, look at the textures there. Billy, are you okay? Oh my gosh, he's not. He's a ghost. Oh, he's so back and better than ever. Okay, anyway, yeah. You can add in multiple trains to the systems. Oh, and lastly, I'd highly recommend having 2 locomotives on each train. One locomotive can carry 4 freight cars, but that's just up an incline. But generally because of momentum, one locomotive is fine. But if you want to be safe, I'd always recommend 2. And lastly, Drones. Do you want to use drones? You should. They are the best for getting some random items from some random place to another. Now, although the system doesn't scale, what am I gonna do? Bring a belt on top of that cliff there? A train? I don't think so. Drones are made for this. And you can technically increase the throughput of them. I use turbo fuel as my main drone fuel source because it's pretty easy to make and it's pretty good. But other fuels can be a lot better and make the drones travel faster. So yeah, you could use a uranium fuel rod to power a drone and that thing will freaking zip. Plutonium as well. But as you can see from the numbers here, packaged fuel, it's like 2 per trip and has like a decent speed. But the jump from packaged fuel to turbo fuel is nuts. And that has been serving me very well in a lot of my larger projects. And another thing when it comes to drones, when you're building drone systems all over your planet, I find it's really useful to have kind of a drone that delivers fuel to all of your other drone port areas. So say I have a fuel power plant, making maybe turbo fuel, package that up, send it in a drone, and then whenever I want to set up drones somewhere else, I send that drone off to them, and it fuels that extra system. That way you can be more free with wherever you want to put your drone ports, and they can work more independently away from your factories. So now we're going to talk about some controls. Satisfactory is an amazing game that has all of the extra things that you would ever want to make your life super duper convenient. Starting with holding and nudging machines. So on a keyboard, you press H, and then you can look around and the machine doesn't move anywhere. It stays where you left it. But then you can use the arrow keys to move it around on the horizontal plane as far as you like. You can then use page up and page down to move it vertically. And then if you hold Alt and move the machine, it mini nudges it instead of a full nudge. So you can really get a lot of precision there. Another great thing with holding and nudging is if you have a giant object, if you press H, it doesn't matter if the surface is uneven. It holds it there, you can nudge it around, you can even have the building floating in like midair, and you can build it wherever the heck you want. In most cases, at least. Satisfactory also has an eyedropper tool button, where you look at a machine with the dismantle mode, you press your eyedropper tool button. For me, I have it bound to one of my side mouse buttons, and it copies the machine, and you can put it down somewhere else. You can also copy entire blueprints. You can press R in dismantle mode to go into blueprint dismantle mode. But then if you look at a blueprint, you can eyedrop that and copy the whole blueprint somewhere else too. Very notably, with all of its existing settings. That way, if you paint a machine, you go into it, you set the clock speed to something, whatever. If you copy that with the eyedropper tool, it copies the item, the color, and the internal settings. Or you can just copy the machine settings by looking at one, pressing Control C on the keyboard, and then looking at another machine and pressing Control V. So now, it's ready to rock and roll. Besides being able to copy and paste recipes, you can also do math inside the machines. So say you want a really specific number here. You can do 1 plus 1, enter, ooh, equals 2. What about 2 times 2? Ooh, 4. What if you're overclocking and do something crazy like 100 times 10 minus 8? Ooh, how fancy is that? But also, you can do the math down here too. Then as you're building your factory, whenever you're building a belt, you have straight and curved build mode. So you can hold R to open up that wheel, or you can just press R, and straight build mode allows you to build on 90-degree angles, which is really nice. Curved build mode, well, lets you build in curves. And default's kind of like just as quick as you can, A to B, chillin'. Same thing with pipes, except you have a lot more options. Straight build mode is the same. Curved build mode, the same. Default, the same. Let's say you're building up, you can go to horizontal vertical, and it'll try and make like nice like 90-degree angles building up. Noodle just does weird stuff. It's kind of like a more chaotic curved build mode. Just lets you build in very strange shapes. And then there's auto 2D mode, which is kind of like default build mode, except a little bit more restrictive, I think. To be honest, I don't really mess around with it. And one of the most important things in the game is when you're building with blueprints, you can press R to go into blueprint auto connect mode. So you put a blueprint down, and then with the auto connect, there makes like a connection between your last blueprint and the next. So once you have the blueprints kind of set up close to each other and you see those green chain links, you click again, and then they are attached. And you can make your next blueprint wherever you want, and it'll attach to the last one. That way you can make huge belt highways in a couple clicks. Or taps on your controller, whatever you're working with. It's also blueprint build mode, where your blueprints just automatically attach to each other. And when you're in blueprint dismantle mode, also deletes the connected parts. So if you have like a big connected belt like this, it's easy to get rid of as well. Satisfactory also has a dismantle filter. So say you have some crazy mess like this here. You don't want to like focus up and try and like collect everyone. You can look at one thing, press G on the keyboard, and then hold a right click for mass dismantle as well. And then you can just look over and it'll only delete the thing you filtered for. Easy peasy. I guess I should have mentioned, you can hold right click to mass dismantle. And there are build modes as well, like zoop, where when you hold R, it opens that window, and then you can zoop up a bunch of tiles at once. And this works with a lot of different building materials, including walls. And then there's also vertical build, where you can build things vertically, go figure. Speaking of colors, you can change the default color of your world. If you press X on the keyboard, you'll open up the customizer. And in it, you can right click on one of your custom colors and set that color to be the standard for your world, the foundation colors, pipe colors, etc. So if I switch this to be the standard, then all the new machines I build will have that new color scheme. But you gotta be careful with this, because if you change that color now, all the machines that are using it will also change. So now these are all white. Now what I personally like to do is whenever I start a game, I want to make one of the customizer colors for all of the different pipes. So with the pipeline swatch, since usually you're gonna be moving and grooving water, I like to make that pipeline swatch blue. Now my existing pipes with that swatch are blue, and all the new pipes I build will be blue. But also same kind of deal with maybe fuel. If I want a fuel pipe, I can right click this, and I can make it the default color for pipes temporarily, and now new pipes that I build will be kind of like the yellowy orange color for fuel pipes. And when I want to switch it back to default, right click on the pipeline swatch, make that pipes, and we're back to blue. In fact, here are all the game's default color codes. So just pause the video as it scrolls through and copy the codes at your leisure. Some fun facts about the colors as well. You can add them to your hotbar. So if you have a finish, you can press 1. Now it's on your hotbar. 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever one you want. And then you can switch between painting things, different colors. On the keyboard, you can also press Alt and use your scroll wheel to cycle through all of your hotbars as well. So you have 10, so you can dedicate one to maybe paints. I have one to belt work and machines, another one for fluids, and you can kind of go from there. But if you do have a swatch selected, you can hold E, and then all of the swatches in its category will come up in a nice little wheel. So those are all the finishes, right? If we go to the custom swatches here, select that and then hold E, all the custom swatches will be in this wheel here. And the last little thing about the color gun is it is a little wacky with some of the numbers, and you can do some goofy things. If you edit one of the swatches, there is this draggable thing here, right? But what you can do is you can type in your own values. So if you make the top value like 1,000, you can sometimes get wacky colors. So this should be like an ultra purple. Might be able to better see it from the side. Yeah, isn't that crazy? This is especially useful just for blacks and whites, because you can put this again to like -1,000, and lets you paint things in like Vanta black instead of just the default scroll wheel stuff. Same thing with the whites, or maybe this would be like +1,000. Nope, that makes like an ultra red. But again, it's kind of like the same thing here. And really, I guess it's just best to mess around with yourself. It's a bit finicky because I don't think this was intended. But you can get some crazy stuff going on. Oh my gosh, I just turned this to 1,000. Did we finally get the color I wanted? Yippee! Very useful stuff. Can make the world look so pretty. Back to some more general stuff though. Everything in the game generally has its own little scroll wheel. So if you select an object and hold E on the keyboard, it'll pull up related objects, so you can quickly select them. This includes belts, power lines, production machines, and a lot of other stuff you might not expect, like the beep booper. Except with it, you hold the mouse button down, and you can scroll through a bunch of stuff to scan for. Or the chainsaw. This one you hold R on the keyboard, and you can switch between area chainsawing and single item chainsawing. So if you're just collecting biomass, you don't care about the area or clearing land out, using the area mode will get a bunch of stuff out from the whole area. But say you just want like one tree in a pair. You can go to single, select that one tree, and it won't destroy all the foliage or the other stuff around it. You can hold a V to scan for all of your ores. There's also an emote wheel where I press and hold T to open it. But when you do have it open and you press a number, you can actually put emotes on your hotbar. So you know, if you're really into rock, paper, scissors, or are super proud of yourself often, you can just have these things on deck. Why not? Also, while holding the rifle, you can hold R, and you can reload with the different ammo types you might have in your inventory. Same thing with the rebar gun, if I had different ammo types. Speaking of the rebar gun, the shatter rebar is very good. It's kind of like a shotgun effect. Of course, you only got the one shot. So I recommend actually having 2 rebar guns. So you can go up to enemies and go blah, blah. It could be especially useful if you're dealing with some of the larger lads. Instant down. Or if not, maybe 3 weapons? I don't know, sometimes it helps. Definitely 2 rifles is really good. Specifically, I like to use the turbo rifle ammo a lot and look in directions and just let her rip, bud, because it's fun. But then once I'm out of ammo, I don't want to reload. I just want to keep on shooting gun, and so I do. Then I reload. Oh yes, the explosive rebar. Could also use that in both of your rebar guns. Or you can use the explosive rebar to set off nobelisks instead of using the detonator for some extra damage. But what a lot of people don't realize is if you can set off 1 nobelisk with the explosive rebar, what's stopping you from setting off a dozen? Or maybe more than a dozen. Fun fact, there's nothing. Oh, it never gets old. So on to probably the most important thing in Satisfactory, blueprints. If you are building factories, you gotta get used to using blueprints. They are a game changer and a time saver. So technically a lifesaver, right? Because in this game, you have to scale up constantly. That requires building a lot more of the same machines over and over and over again, belts over and over and over again, setting the recipes, etc., etc. And over the course of a playthrough, that can get pretty old. But with blueprints, oh, wow, wow, wow. You can do all that in one click. And better than that, blueprints auto-connect. You can select blueprint auto-connect. That way, you put down your first blueprint, and it's chilling. But then with your next blueprint, you see those little squares on the inbound line? That shows it's ready to auto-connect. And when you move close to belts, it tries to link up, but it's not linked up yet. You have to click one more time to actually establish it. Once you do that, the blueprints have auto-connected. And you can build this wherever the heck you want, or wherever it's possible, really. And then they connect together. You can also do that with machine systems as well. But you might notice, wait, why isn't that splitter connecting to the merger over there? Well, because there's no belt on the next blueprint, the mergers aren't able to look at the last one and auto-connect. So on the blueprint, I'll just add on a little tiny belt here, a little tiny belt there. So then we had the belts on the other end. They see the new input and they're like, ooh, let's auto-connect, let's rock and roll, buddy. So once they do auto-connect, you see the 2 chains there. You click, then you can drag it around and put the other blueprint wherever the heck you want. No problem. The nice thing as well is in blueprint dismantle mode, you also get rid of that auto connection bit. So when you do build with blueprints, they're easier to clean up in case something goes whoopsies. Making a temporary little blueprint for a quick project can save hours as well. Like for example, if we just wanted to make a bunch of fuel generators, right? It doesn't feel like there's much you can do in here, but you can. You can go into the middle here, and you can set up that little junction right there. That's it, that's the whole blueprint. But if you're building a ton of fuel generators en masse, right? This is saving you 2 clicks each. And over the course of like 100 generators, oh my gosh, that is a lot of work saved. Because in this example, if we just mirror these, all that's really left to do is connect the pipes to here, and then to there, etc., etc. Beyond that, you get your Mark 1, 2, and 3 blueprint makers. The size of the Mark 1 is 4x4, 5x5, then 6x6. You'll definitely want blueprints for a basic constructor setup, basic assembler setup, probably a manufacturer setup, depends on how wild you're going. And then absolutely for sure, refinery setups. Holy smokes, do you build a lot of refineries in old Satisfactory the video game. Beyond that, a big belt highway blueprint will serve you well. So if you ever need to bring things from one side of the world or one side of the factory to another, just auto-connect those, send them on their way. And you can make this blueprint with whatever material you like. The Mark I belts are just an example. And if you didn't know, train tracks also auto-connect, so you can lock them together and send them on their way. And also, when you're building trains or just building around your world, at some point you should make like some sort of main logistics line support. So what I like to do is I like just to have the most basic thing possible, or this is pretty much it. The train lines will go on top of this, and then I could have belts underneath. And I put like a main support every so often to connect to the ground, because that kind of looks cool sometimes. And once I get rid of the scaffolding and just have those pillars, it's like floating tracks, and yeah, it kind of looks all right. But definitely a lot better with the belts underneath. But no, definitely do something intricate. Go crazy with this. It really helps out with building train systems. And even if you do want to have floating train lines or whatever, these pillar supports that you get in the Awesome Shop actually snap on. So when you go into like zoop mode here, you just have that go to the ground. And look at that. You have train supports right there. No problem at all. And yes, this works with the small ones as well, and even on slopes. They're very dynamic. And beyond the mission critical stuff, when you start using blueprints, it's a lot easier to design more intricate machines. Because you just have to make it once, and then you just copy and paste it a bunch of times, and it looks super detailed. Or even using blueprints as decorative features. Like in this building here, there's a giant structure of concrete all over the place, but each of the little panels is its own little blueprint. So I just alternated between some designs, and it looks really neat, especially from afar. And that's just scratching the surface. Even to this day, after like 3,000 hours of playing Satisfactory, I'm still trying and learning new things. Like using blueprints more is a game changer. So let's talk building factories. One big subject is load balancing versus manifold systems. So each of these constructors here wants 30 items per minute. So say we have a belt that can supply 90 items per minute. If it's distributed into 3, that means each of these machines will get that 30 per minute. So 90 here divided by 3 means 30 per constructor. That way they all run evenly, and the system kind of boots up faster. Whereas with a manifold system, it takes a little bit of time for everything to build up and run properly, but it's infinitely expandable, and it's pretty easy to understand. Each machine needs the 30 items per minute. So what happens is, however many items enter through the beginning, just enters through a splitter, splits off into the machines. Eventually that machine will fill up because it can't handle all the items, and material will overflow into the next part of the manifold. So as you can see, this belt kind of stopped. Some more items will go this way, filling up this machine, etc., etc. Or I guess you could think of it as like a trickle-down system. And in almost all cases, it's way easier just to build a manifold and let her rip. And it works practically the same. There are a few instances, though, where you really do want items to be distributed proportionally. Say you're building like a really complicated nuclear power plant. You really want the uranium fuel rods to be built at the right pace, so the power plants get them at the right times, and they don't end up getting too many fuel rods and making too much uranium waste, causing problems. But even in that scenario, it's hardly ever an issue. But there's a way more important use case for load balancing. Let's say, for example, you're building factories all over the world, and then you end up at another factory with 3 belts with the same kind of item on them. Let's say it's just iron ingots, for example, right? So this belt could have, 30 items per minute. This could have 90. This could have 237.5 items per minute. Well, you could measure this with a throughput monitor and find out, but at the end of the day, you want to distribute those items evenly across a bunch of machines so you can actually use them. So one thing you can do, which is kind of like a load balancer, is an injection manifold. So you put in a splitter, just like a normal manifold system, but then, since you know these couple machines at the beginning are using some of the items, you throw in a merger into the manifold and bring the next belt into the manifold to top up the belt. And then you continue it from there. In fact, there's even a priority merger in the game that is specifically designed for a system like this, where you put this as high priority and the input belt as a lower priority. That keeps things running smoothly. But there is a way more efficient and way more confusing way to go about this. and that is with a load balancer. So I have a variety of different ones that I've made over the years. For example, there's this one, which takes 3 random inputs and creates 2 equal outputs. So it's like, hey, I don't know what belt 1, 2, and 3 are, and I don't care. I put them into this, and because of how all the belts are organized, I will end up with 2 equal ones on the other end. And all these are systems of logic, where if you redistribute things through splitters and mergers, you can balance out the belts. And there's a lot of examples online. Some of them are really, really useful and really, really simple to build yourself, like having 2 splitters. The top one goes to the next merger, and also to the bottom merger, and then the bottom merger goes to the bottom merger, and the top merger. So it shuffles the belts and equals out the inputs. But you can also take these balancers way out of control. Like say you have 4 items you need to balance, 4 unequal belts, you don't know what's going on. Well, then you can bring it through a crazy balancer like this and out poops 4 equal belts. This could be extremely useful in a train station, for example, where you don't exactly know the throughputs of the trains. Or they're just unequal. And then if you really want to go crazy, you can make them pretty much as large as you want, so long as your sanity holds up. Though at this point, you might just want to consider an injection manifold. And then if you're building factories, my 2 best tips are to use blueprints and build vertically. And if you're building vertically, there's a really cool feature that can help you out with that. Or say, for example, you want to bring a belt all the way from down there, all the way up here. Well, one option is to use conveyor lift, right? But it only goes so high. And then you'd have to do like this weird like sneaky pattern, and it's like, it works, you know, it works. Or you can make the conveyor lift go an infinite length. And what you do is you use the conveyor lift floor hole. You put that on a platform. Then you go way back down to ground level and you start building conveyor lift. When you try and build up, it hits a limit. However, if you just look at that conveyor floor hole, the lift connects. And it doesn't matter the height. This could go literally from the ground to space. It doesn't matter. You can make conveyor lifts as tall as you want without doing these zigzag shenanigans. I use this trick all the time, and it helps a ton with blueprints as well. But how do you make these huge conveyor lifts if you don't have flight? Well, what you can do is you can set down the conveyor lift. Just make sure it's like measured to the right spot. And then you can hold it there. And while you're holding it there, although it doesn't reach right now, you can keep it there and like climb a ladder that's just beside or nearby, all the way to your destination. Then if you can get an angle on the underside of the conveyor lift, that lift all the way down there will pop right up. And there you have it. Infinite conveyor lift, even without creative flight. Oh, and the other side of having an infinitely tall lift, you can have an infinitely small lift. Okay, it's not infinitely small, but it's a mini one, wherein the usual height of a lift is minimum, well, that, which is about 2 conveyor poles tall. But that's not actually the case. If you have a connection point close to another one, where you can fit a lift, you connect one, and flip it to connect to the other. Sometimes you just have to have the belts pre-made on them, but then it'll go blank like that. But you can build it, and it makes a mini lift. Isn't it cute? Wow, 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 wow. This is also extremely useful if you're really tight on belt space. Because if I need a belt to go from here to right there, the only solution is mini lift. But then yeah, you can get the belts to turn extremely tightly like this. And it looks pretty good as well. Ooh, but there's an even more powerful technique that's stronger than the infinite lift thing. And that is the infinite head lift trick using water towers. You see, if you have a bunch of pipes that are all going up high, right? That requires a lot of pumps. That's annoying. Well, spoilers, you don't need them, because you're able to build pressurizing water towers in Satisfactory. So what happens is we have a separate pipe that pumps water all the way to the top of this water tower. That sets the head lift at that height. And if we connect that water pipe to any other pipes, it sets all the head lift for the other pipes to the same height as the fluid buffer. So with all the pipes down there, we don't need to worry about any head lift or pumps or nothing because of this water tower. and all the pipes can scoot off to wherever they need to be, like the towers, where yes, there are pumps buried in there somewhere because they're taller than the water tower. But I could just make that water tower even taller as well, and then we wouldn't have to worry about that, but I'm more of a rule of cool kind of guy, and although that would logically make sense, it would ruin the aesthetics here. And on that note, hypertubes. They're tubes with an entrance that can take you from A to B. However, each entrance gives you a little bit of velocity. So if you stack multiple entrances in the same direction, you keep building momentum, which means you can build hypertube cannons. And if you set this in a blueprint, you have a cannon that can launch you anywhere in the map in no time at all. They are amazing, arguably super broken, but also very, 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 very fun. And the cannon I use here is an older model, which takes a ton of power, but it's a little faster to head out with. But with Satisfactory 1.1, there is a more efficient design that uses hypertube branches to kind of send you around a loop a bunch of times, gaining momentum, and then firing you out the same way the normal hypertube cannon would. So what you do is you enter it, and then you circle around kind of the particle accelerator a couple times. Once you feel like you have enough momentum, you spam E, hopefully escape it, and then off you go, same dealio. And once you get used to a cannon like that, you can determine how far you want to fly with how many times you go through the loop. And now for one of Satisfactory's most powerful alternate recipe chains, where you can take 1 crude oil and turn it into either 3 rubber or 3 plastic. But the catch is, the process is very complicated, but I'll try to explain it the best I can. So let's start with rubber here, where say you have 900 crude oil per minute. I do recommend 900, by the way. Then you put that into refineries to make heavy oil residue. This is an alternate recipe that takes crude oil and turns it into heavy oil residue and polymer resin. The heavy oil residue then goes into blenders. And using the diluted fuel alternate recipe in the blenders, you take the heavy oil residue and water to turn it into a lot of fuel. Most of that fuel will then go to the end of the chain for recycled rubber, another alternate recipe. And that is the main chain. However, for the recycled rubber, you need plastic to recycle into the rubber. So way back at the beginning, at the heavy oil residue alternate, we get the polymer resin. That polymer resin will go and turn into residual rubber. This is a default recipe in the refineries. And once you have that rubber, you will recycle that into plastic using the recycled plastic alternate recipe, using both the rubber you just made out of the polymer resin and some of the fuel from the diluted fuel blenders. So it would be about 300 of that going down to the plastic. And then the plastic you make there goes to the end chain where you get all of your rubber. But you won't have enough. Once you get all of that part set up, the system will work, but you will need more plastic to get the optimal amount of rubber at the end of the day. So what you'll have to do is set up more refineries, recycle more plastic, using more of your fuel from the initial source, but then you have to use your final output to circle back into the production chain to recycle again. Now I don't have that connected because Modeler doesn't like that. But once you do connect that, you'll have enough plastic to fully feed the recycled rubber refineries and get the goods, which will actually be 2,700 rubber per minute, because the 500 still has to be sent back to this in order to run properly. And again, if you're going to do this, I highly, highly recommend you use 900 crude oil per minute. If you use 600, the numbers get wacky. 300, same deal. You want to deal with decimal points? I sure don't. So I usually stick with 900 per minute. And then vice versa, it is the same thing for plastic, where you're making heavy oil residue, making diluted fuel, having that go into recycled plastic refineries. The polymer resin makes some plastic. The plastic is recycled into rubber this time, and that helps feed the final refineries. And once the system is going, some of your end product goes back into the system to make more rubber so that the final refineries will work properly. And yes, unfortunately, this is not exactly a 1-to-3 ratio. Technically speaking, you get like 2,600 plastic per minute, but it's still really, 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 really good. And then if you haven't already, definitely take a screenshot of this. So one last little section here about planning and mindset. And the most common thing I'm always asked is, how much do I build of what? And the answer, if it's your first playthrough ever, is just make it automated. That's it. The numbers don't matter. Even inside this huge block here, there are 2 floors that I could use to beat the entire game. In fact, it's how I gotten through most of the space elevator parts already. And that is just downstairs here in my factory of factories. Pretty much how all of this works is it's just like, hey, I have a machine. It needs to make stuff. Okay, don't care about the numbers. Once I have the things being made, it overflows into another machine that needs some of the stuff, etc., etc. On and on it goes, also into dimensional depots. This is mostly for supplying my dimensional depot. But really, I could just have these belts overflow into every single thing in the game. All the space elevator parts, all the future things, everything. And it doesn't have to be much more than this. It can also be a lot more spread out. But really, this is like 2 floors to automate everything. And again, doesn't have to be more than this. And then if you find you're enjoying yourself quite a lot, then expand out the wazoo. But in any playthrough, I'd highly recommend to embrace verticality. Like, you're gonna wanna build up because you're gonna run out of land space at some point, and leave lots of extra room to expand because you never know what you're gonna want more of. And then a lot of people ask, Kibitz, when do I start building my big permanent factories and really lock in to scale up? And for me, I want 3 things. I want advanced steel production for the Mark II miners. You need oil processing and petroleum power. And then most importantly, you'll want Mark IV belts. And you need these things for specific reasons. For one, when you're getting started, fuel power is the boost you need to start building your proper factories. And then for the Mark II miners, if you put those on a normal node here, and then you fully overclock them, they get you 300 items per minute. Or on a pure node, you can overclock them with 2 power shards and get 480 items per minute. So that's a great amount of items that you can get with Mark IV belts. But here's the main reason. You get your Mark I belt, then you get your Mark II belt really quick. Mark III takes a little bit, and then a tiny bit longer, you get your Mark IV. But the jump from Mark IV to Mark V is huge. So I think doing temporary stuff all through these tiers is fine. Get to Mark IV, start building the big stuff. Oh, and then from Mark V to Mark VI, it's like forever. So again, once you have the Mark IV belts, Mark II miners, and fuel power, that's when I recommend you start scaling things up. Another common question is, should you bring all the resources in the world to one location or build a bunch of factories all over the place? Both have their merits. Having everything in one location allows you to build one ginormous mega base, which is really cool. It kind of limits you to one style. And worse than that, it's so laggy, oh my gosh. Whereas if you build multiple bases all over the place, it lets you experiment with different build styles. It also keeps the lag at bay, because if you're building to like this kind of scale, your greatest enemy really is just the game collapsing. And then no matter what you're doing, it's always going to be a little difficult keeping track of things. Personally, I have an Excel spreadsheet that has all of my notes and whatnot, but a pen and paper can usually do just as well. Or if you haven't tried it before, color coding can actually be quite fun. And if all else fails, there's always signs. And a lesser known thing is when you're playing Satisfactory, make a note of where you left off. I found even with myself, sometimes I boot up the game and I'm like, what was I doing? Everything's crazy. But it helps a ton if I just have literally anything written down. Like, hey, you're working on crystal oscillators for X project and you're making this many and you got this much done, yada yada. Something to make the re-onboarding a little bit smoother. Another common question I get is, what alternate recipes should you use? When you scan a hard drive, you get an alternate recipe, and there is a lot of weird stuff going on. Do you make your screws out of iron ingots? Or what about steel beams to make screws? What if you don't want to make screws ever at all in your entire playthrough, and opt for some of the alternate recipes, like the stitched iron plates, or the steeled frames? What's the game plan? Well, generally speaking, it's really whatever you want to use. Or, there is this incredible post by Rye516 on the Satisfactory subreddit where he has systematically ranked every alternate in the game. They even built an entire tool where you can sort for what you kind of want. Like, hey, how quick would this take to build? Or how many resources does this require? How much power will this take? What sort of outputs do you want? Etc., etc., etc. The post also has a ton of stuff, like what happens if you just use base recipes versus alternates, some overall best kind of recipes to use. Like the pure copper ingot one is like really good resource-wise, but makes you use a lot more power. Turbo diamonds, diluted fuel. But even with all of these rankings, like sometimes you just use what's available and convenient. Like, hey, maybe you just have a bunch of extra oil lying around and you're like, I don't really want to make like a million iron plate machines. So you just use an alternate for coated iron plates. Uses some plastic, some iron, makes a ton of iron plates and saves you on machines. Now, is it the best alternate in the world? Just a B tier? Not really. Is oil a super valuable resource that can be turned into power? Yeah, but maybe you have enough power. Maybe you have too much plastic. Screw it. Use the alt. It's one of the best parts of the game, is mixing it up like that. That being said, though, there are a handful of alternate recipes I'll pretty much always use every playthrough, for sure. The first are just a set that get rid of screws in the game, which is the stitched alternate plate recipe that uses iron plate and wire for reinforced iron plates. The alternate steeled frame recipe, which uses the reinforced iron plate, steel pipes to make modular frames. The steel rotor recipe, steel pipes and wire to make rotors. And the heavy modular frames alt without screws, heavy encased frames. And using those recipes eliminates screws from the entire game. Outside of that, I lean towards convenience alternates and resource optimization ones, and practically never concern myself about power. So recipes like the solid steel ingot one are another one of my go-tos. Mostly because it's more resource efficient at the cost of power, and also the numbers are just more nice to work with. Oh, and another classic, iron wire, iron ingots into wire, which saves me on a ton of copper. And off into the refineries here. The pure copper ingot alternate, it's just the ratio is too good. 15 ore to 37.5 ingots, amazing. Same deal with Caterium, ratio is incredible. And lastly, same thing for quartz. I also like to use refineries for the sloppy alumina alternate. This just makes aluminum a lot easier to work with when you don't have silica to worry about. And then as well, the pure aluminum ingot recipe that takes the scrap into ingots, no other nonsense needed. And then probably my favorite alternate recipe is in the blender, the diluted fuel alternate. It takes heavy oil residue and water to make fuel. This is incredible because you're practically turning water into an oil product, which is like, woo, wow. Beyond that, there in the particle accelerator, there's a turbo diamonds recipe, which is the most efficient diamond recipe, and diamonds are crazy expensive, so I'm looking forward to using this a lot more. And then for just convenience, this dark matter crystallization alt that takes dark matter residue and makes a crystal out of it. It is convenient because dark matter residue is a byproduct of a lot of late game recipes. And then everything else kind of depends on the situation with what kind of materials I have nearby or what I feel like producing. And I'm sure a lot of you have been wondering, Kibitz, what is this program you've been using with all the Satisfactory things? What are this? This is called Satisfactory Modeler. It's a free program on Steam. And I don't know all the ins and outs of it, quite honestly, but it is very handy for at least planning things out. Like say I wanted 60 nuclear pasta per minute. You just make this little box by right-clicking, then you drag this out, and it shows you the recipes that are possible there, and you just keep on going down the line, using what you want, until eventually you can figure out what you're doing. Now, these webs can get absolutely abhorrent, because there are a lot of recipes that are in the game, but it really helps like visualize your entire plan or adjust it if your ambitions were a little too insane. There's also the website Satisfactory Calculator, where you can get like an in-game map and you can find locations of whatever you want. It also has its own like production planner in it as well. I'm not super familiar with it personally, but a lot of people like it and mess around with it. Usually what I like to use is both the map and this item page. It shows you all the items in the game and you can kind of click on them and see all of the inputs and outputs in machines. It's just a nice quick reference. Then to close out here, some mindset stuff. Anything is better than nothing. If you're working on a project, just do a little piece of it and then go from there. Like for this whole crazy thing, I think I spent like an entire day just making one of like the little blueprint parts of it. Like these. Place like 3 down, and then that was it for the whole day. Like with all things in life, it's not the amount of progress you make at once. It's more about the consistency and remembering that 1 is greater than 0. Doing anything is better than nothing. Also, don't be afraid to delete things. If you build something you don't like it, destroy it. In fact, this entire turbo fuel power plant was on the chopping block just until the other day. Then I realized, oh, I can do the project I was thinking of somewhere else. It was this giant refinery pit project I was gonna build over there. I was like, oh yeah, there's another pit of water right next door. And the last thing is, if you're struggling to stay motivated in your projects in this game, I'd highly recommend making a plan and then breaking that plan into as small as steps as possible. Like for example, I wanted to make 60 nuclear pasta per minute in Satisfactory. It requires 72,000 copper ingots, oh my gosh. But I just did like a little bit over a couple months, and eventually I got all the copper powder done. And all I have to do is set up some particle accelerators and GG. It just helps to know what the plan is, to make a little bit of progress every so often. You can even see with my production here. First setup was 750 copper powder, then 1500, then I built more and more and more because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm getting things done. And then suddenly it is done. I like to equate it to a Lego project. Like, I don't know about you, but I've never heard of someone giving up on a Lego set, even if it's like 9,000 pieces. Why? Because you know what the end goal is, and you get an instruction booklet to walk you through step by step on how to complete it. Same deal in Satisfactory? In fact, it's the same deal in life. It's good to figure out where you want to go and break down the steps to get there. Till eventually, it's done. Just like this insane tips video here, which took me many weeks. I knew eventually how to get her done, with some help from my amazing editor. But no, that's it. And if you want to use some of my blueprints, they're all available on Patreon, along with a pack full of starter blueprints. But besides that, if you want to watch some Satisfactory Let's Play videos and the like, definitely subscribe for more. And if you're expecting more tutorials, they're not coming. I'm not making any more tutorials. This was it. This was the whole enchilada. I'm done. Pretty much half the reason I made this was just so I had a reference like, Keypoints, how do I do X, Y, Z? And I'll point them towards this. This is the guidebook. Okay, great, fantastic. Hope it helped. But anyway, that is all for now. So enjoy your journey, take care, and bye-bye.